over 3,000 hours in sim racing. I've built setups for all the GT3 cars across every update in Le Mans Ultimate. If I had to rebuild one of them, I'd do this. Most people build setups by clicking values and hoping it works. One change affects everything. So you test, drive, test, and end up slower. After thousands of hours, you start to see the whole picture. A ride height change doesn't just do one thing, it affects entry, mid-corner and exits. Beginners don't see that. So how do you shortcut these thousands of hours? By following a system. One change, one expected result. I use this across different simulators. HSC, HC Evo, Le Mans Ultimate. It's not tied to one simulation. You make a change and move on to the next step so you don't get lost in every parameter. Let's get into it. We pick Spa for this setup build. We're gonna pick the Aston Martin and make sure you use the same conditions. So I usually use the light grip and 20 degrees. So it gives me a good average. And this is what I do with all my builds. So the first step in car setup building is to not get lost in every parameter because we can change multiple things. The first thing what we're gonna do, gonna be in the exploration phase because we need to understand the car. First thing what we're gonna do, we're gonna add max rear wing and we need to adjust the rear ride height and we wanna use 50% fuel every time, so we get an average between like a full fuel car and like an empty car. Okay, Arnoud, but why? Let me explain. I'm setting the high wing and we're going into the first step. Why do I do this? Because I want to know how this car acts under high wing, low wing and mid wing. We actually don't know what is fastest. So first we need to test this and then we can move on to the second step. I can say to you understeer, oversteer, understeer, but if you can visually understand it, then it will actually mean something to you when you make a ride height change. So imagine when your car is traveling at low speed, you have no aerodynamics. Airflow has a very minor influence on how the car is acting. When we go faster, however, we have aerodynamics playing a part. So I want you to imagine this blue aerodynamic box sucking the car into a certain balance. When we add rear wing to the car, we create an element of understeer under high speed because the rear axle is being forced harder on the track to downforce. However, if we want to get rid of the understeer in this moment, we need to increase the rear ride height because that will shift this aerodynamic platform forward. It's an explanatory model to visually understand the change that we just did. We need to test our rear ride height together with the high wing on Air Rouge Radiant and Blanchiment. And the goal will be to do this full throttle on the Blanchiment without lifting and ideally also without lifting through Radiant and Air Rouge, but it also needs to feel safe. So if you go too high on ride heights, arrow shifts forward, we might lose control in one of these corners. Then you push it too far. If you feel massive understeer, then you don't have enough rear ride height, so you need to increase it. So I'm also turning off every flag rule and tire warmers. Obviously I turn on because I want to save as much time as possible. So you can see I'm speeding here in the pit lane. Is it realistic? No. Does it work? Yes. And the first thing immediately I want to know is as I go through Air Rouge and Radiant, do I have understeer or oversteer with the high wing? So for this example, I can power through it, but if I couldn't make this section, I would add rear ride height to shift the aero box forward, and I would lower the ride height if I would lose control over there. You might see understeer or oversteer on different parts on your outlap here. That doesn't matter. We're not focusing on this corner, for instance. But we want to be able to carry Blanchiment at least full throttle. Again, if that doesn't work, if you spin it here, you have too much ride height. And if you understeer, you need to add ride height. Now the goal is not lap time, absolutely not. But we want to get in a lap with the high wing. So my lap time was a 2:22, which is not really that impressive. So the first change that I did is I added a bunch of rear ride height to see if I can get more rotation and still be safe on Eau Rouge, Radion and Blanchiment. Now by increasing that rear ride height, the only noticeable change I got here was that I had to steer less to take this corner section. And if you're looking at the delta on the top right, you can see it's like climbing a little bit, right? This is the simple reason. If I don't have to steer so much, the car setup is just better because I'm not pushing the speed out of the car while turning the wheel so much. And I don't have to steer so much over here. So you can see how my lap time is like already down for like 2/10 in this first sector. Overall, the setup is just a little bit nervous under slow corners, and I have the feeling that I cannot put the power down. I see my traction control constantly blipping, going on and off in my display. So, and this is something like, this is just a hack now that I'm gonna give to you. This is outside of the system, but a lot of times you wanna run very soft anti-roll bars and you wanna run very soft spring rates, because that just gives you more traction on exit, which makes the TC not interfere so much, so you can actually put that power down and get better exits. And everyone who has better exits has better lap times. Another thing you really want to start doing if you're tuning from the default is lower the front ride heights to the minimum and use, because like lower cars are just faster. Only caveat here is that when you have unexplainable control or the car just bottoms out a lot, so you hear like a lot, you hear like the floor of the car like shh, then you need to increase it again. But lowering this and softer suspension is really something that really works well at the moment. Now I did another run with the high wing, and with the lower ride heights and the more softer rear suspension, have a look on the front top left how this is changing the lap. Now I'll not bore you with all the testing that I did, but if we move forward, for instance, I imagine over here as well, we're 5/10 down from the previous lap. And again, I am not pushing super hard, I'm just doing 85% of my driving. And look at just this corner with the rear axle, the soft suspension. As I hit the throttle here, exiting this corner, still the same TC settings, 1.2 seconds by lowering the car, still on the high wing at 220.9. I need to point out that in the first run, I did like a little bit of an oversteery, twitchy moment because of that stiffer rear axle, but now the bust up chicane became like super safe and I could push. Also take note, this is on 50% fuel and the low grip value. Let's move on. Now I want to test the low wing, because I don't know, maybe this is super quick for this Aston or maybe not. So I want to get to the other extreme and I want to remove the rear wing. But if I do that, then I need to change the ride height, because if the pressure disappears from the rear axle, all of this aerodynamic balance that I have now with the aero box, I might have just way too much oversteer. So I lower the rear wing and drop the rear ride height from the settings that I was using from the high wing setup. So I just copy that setup, remove the wing, remove the rear ride height. So I focus again on Eau Rouge and Blanchiment and change the rear ride height accordingly to the rear wing. Now it's crucial for every car to test out the low wing, but I need to point out that sometimes you cannot run the low wing through this corner section. Some cars just don't want to do it and you lose control over here. This Aston also got really light on the rear, but I was able to go through it. So look at that delta on the top right. This is absolutely insane. Look how much time we gain by using the low wing. So this is also an important note on this no-name corner. I kind of had some problems here because obviously it's a sketchy car with the low wing, so I'm losing time here. But if we fast forward to the end, again, you see here on the last sector, look how much time I am gaining on that straight. I mean, if I would do a race, I would want to have this low wing because I'm gonna overtake everyone on the straight. And this lap time was a half a tenth quicker with the low wing. You want to get a 85% lap time with the high wing, and then you can start comparing that to the low wing, and then you try a middle ground. And why is this so important? Well, if you are driving and you don't know what setup parameter helps or whatever, now you know on Spa that the low wing just favors this car a lot. Okay? These three setups you created, you also use for every other track, and you can just do an outlap with the high wing, you can do an outlap with the low wing, and for instance when you're on Qatar, or when you're on Silverstone, or when you are on any other track, you can immediately see, hey, the low wing is quicker, the high wing is quicker, and you start building on that setup on the next steps I'm gonna explain. And in the second step, we have a new goal. We're gonna build on this baseline what we created on the mid wing, and we're gonna create safety on Puhan or add aggression to the Puhan corner and overall build on the setup to make it quicker. Before we go into that, I need to point out that the Puhan is a corner where you kind of dive into changing a steering direction, and it's kind of a really extreme situation for your car. So if you can find a balance, let's say on this mid wing that we're gonna build, if I find safety there and proper rotation, then that setting gives me information that I also can carry to any other track, because it's just the most extreme situation for this car, most likely. So let's keep going. So I need to mention something about the front packers and front axle stiffness in pretty much every GT3 car. So this next corner, the Puhan, we're gonna focus on next, because it's very determining on how stiff our front axle can be and how, if we need to use front packers. This car doesn't really have that problem, but a lot of people lose it on this specific section, and let's talk about that a little bit. Increasing lots of ride heights to create rotation on Blanchiment and Eau Rouge works, but sometimes you just lose it on the Puhan corner. And what tends to help, if that happens to you, you either go stiffer on front anti-roll bar, stiffer on front springs, or add packers without adding ride height. You will get an element of understeer in the fast corners like Blanchiment, but especially the packers can be a great safety net for the entry on Puhan. So if you're in the first step and you just keep struggling, stiffening up the front axle, stiffening up the front anti-roll bar, packers, or or differently. So sometimes, for instance, on this car, if I just wanted to add a small layer of safety, adding packers. Why does this work? Let me explain with the model. So by adding front packers to the car, we limit the aero box shift. So the car is not pitching anymore because we're getting rid of some spring travel, suspension travel. And that means that the front ride height will not go as low, but only really under braking and super high speed. But we can still enjoy maybe the low wing and these ride heights we are running. So this is for the braking. Also the spring stiffness gonna have an element to this. And also the anti-roll bar is about this front entry grip that you kind of reduce when you stiffen it up. Let's move on. On this car we don't have that problem though. After running the tests with the mid-wing, which I particularly like most, I got like 7 centimeters of ride height on the back, and I got 8 degrees of wing, so this is my mid-wing setup. And now I want to get more out of the car, because there are some elements of understeer under the entry on other corners. So I focused now mainly a softer front suspension, and to get more lap time out of it, and I'm gonna use this sector to figure out my limit, like how soft can I go on my front axle, because that softness on the front axle, anti-roll bar, spring stiffness is gonna help me to rotate the car better, and therefore going on throttle earlier, and therefore getting even better lap times. I feel very safe, and like there's still an element of understeer in the car over here. I need to wait a lot. And also there's a next section. The front end is just still a bit too lazy. But over here I just need to wait. I need to trail brake aggressively to make the car turn over here as well. And the reason why I'm sticking with the mid wing is just basically this corner. I can just enter it quickly and have this like a good balance here. Also here, I still need to lift. We're gonna tackle these issues and getting to even faster lap times. If you're liking this content this far, could you please hit the like button? That would really help me out. And if you're really serious about car setups and you want to learn them like 10 times faster than watching these kinds of videos, I highly recommend the Art of Car Setups Base Edition. It shows you a 7-step process to build car setups in the simulation. Let's keep going. Because we can enter Wuhan still safely, I softened the front spring rates, and you could also consider to soften the front ones as well. And I also lowered the TC settings because I felt like the TC was holding me back. Let's look at the next lap, and then in the third step we're gonna add even more aggression, but not to upset ourselves in the Wuhan, but take again other corner sections to make this whole setup work for this track. Another thing I think really works well on this section is use the lowest camber and always the lowest pressures. Just as a side note, if you look in the telemetry, a lot of times this is just giving you a better tire patch contact. But obviously, if you really want to min-max it out, you should go look into Motec. Important with these test runs, if you every now and then do a great corner execution, you carry that with you in your setup builds. For instance, this part really was a lot easier to do. So I gained a lot of time by just doing this first corner properly. But when I was driving overall on the lap, I just gained a little bit of time every here and now and then. I was just not doing the proper inputs, but I could overall feel that this delta was just coming towards me, only by small steps. And this was by lowering the TC and softening the front springs. I just got a little bit more rotation. But obviously, when you're getting closer to a little bit of a better lap time, the smaller tweaks also gonna be like smaller adjustments. Now this is an important part. I'm gonna show it again. Over here, I still needed to lift here, and I would just want to get rid of that with using it in the third step. And this lap time again was like a little bit faster, 20, almost a 219. Now in the third step of my car setup building, I want to build further on that base setup in the third step, but now I want to find some lap time, so I'll add setup aggression and I want more throttle freedom. We already did lower the TC, and I'm gonna add rear packers. But why am I adding packers instead of anti-roll bar or springs? Let me explain. Cars that rotate faster allow you to go on throttle earlier, and that will always result in better lap times. If you're going to go on throttle earlier than the competition, then you'll drive away from them every exit. So that's what you want in the end. When you have a setup that doesn't kill you on Wuhan, where you can safely travel through Eau Rouge and Blanchimont, then we can add some rear packers. And what this does, it's gonna create a car that will be more alive on the rear axle, but with the soft springs and the soft anti-roll bar, we still enjoy that traction. But when we are driving a little bit faster, like the corners I explained where I still have the understeer, now all of a sudden I might get more rotation in the car, which then allows me to go on throttle earlier. From an aerodynamic standpoint, it prevents the aero box going backwards when we're on the throttle or when we are on high speed. The big objection you could have here, well, why didn't you just add rear ride height? Well, if I add more ride height to it, then this box also goes more forward. Now I'm just setting a limit on the travel, which just prevents the car from squatting down so much, which allows me to use a little bit more forward-facing aero under throttle behavior, but under braking, we're still using the same limit. Like I explained before, if you add the packers, you limit it on the front. With the rear packers, you limit it on the rear. There's also this overload and like tire load sensitivity that you add to the rear, which also makes the car rotate better. Let's not get into that right now, but this is basically what I did. And it's gonna depend heavily on some cars. Some cars really don't like the packers and others thrive on it. For instance, this Aston Martin, we added the rear packers. Another thing we did is reduce the rear toe. So this creates, again, a more lively rear end. The stability is kind of getting reduced when you're using less toe-in. So let's look at the lap. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I had to do this lap one time and another time, but now I'm actually in the flow, and I'm only, again, not bore you with this lap, but you can just see that, like, I wasn't really improving, but on this section, I was. And this is where the rear packers really started to thrive. So I could go on throttle over here, and here I start to gain lap time, and especially this corner. The car is balanced, I can hit the throttle, I feel rotation, and look at the delta over here as well. I don't have to lift, and you can see that there's another 2/10 by just adding some rear packers and getting speed on the exit. And this is just what you carry over all the way to the end. Now, a 219 isn't that impressive, but mind you, we are on the low grip and we're having 50% of fuel in the car. So I'm pretty confident we can go into some 218s on the low fuel on a quali lap, and on races I really much believe we can go into high 19s consistently and safely. I'm fully aware we're not touching on every slider in the game, but I hope this can help you to start out, because if you feel those differences with these few settings we changed, you can literally transform every other car in this game to your liking. Now, building setups might be fun, but now it comes actual to racing and winning some races or get better results. Then I highly recommend that video, because that will be 25 tips to actually bring this car setup to actually good results. Thanks for watching. What are you waiting for? Click on it.